Recording in progress.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We are going to call this meeting to order now. It is 6:41 on August 21st, 2023, and this is a public meeting on the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission. Si María, por favor, ¿podrías dar la información de interpretación en español?
Por supuesto.
Gracias.
Esta es una reunión pública sujeta a las leyes del Estado de Oregón y a las normas administrativas de la ciudad de Portland y va a ser grabada. Hay interpretación disponible en español para esta reunión. Al acceder a la interpretación en español, verá el video de los oradores, pero el audio será reemplazado por el intérprete. Para acceder a la interpretación, por favor, haga clic en Interpretación de lenguaje. En los controles de la reunión de Zoom, en la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccione Español.
Muchas gracias, María. Gracias. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Kevin and Katie. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. But please note that this is an automatic captioning services and is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to the City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon State Law and SBN report. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom Q&A feature as the commissioners are presenting and or discussing things. If attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. Now I will pass it to Co-Chair Dan for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm one of the three co-chairs for this final phase of our work. And I have been giving the land acknowledgement that's from City Hall, and I constantly say that if I wrote my own, it'd be stronger than this, but this is what we've got. So we acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Calumet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past and working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationships, these lands and waters. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Now we're gonna review our community agreements. And I remember there is 3 pages, and we can have it on the slides, please.
Just bear with us one moment, please.
Sure. Sasha, ¿necesitas algo? Estaba viendo que tu mano estaba levantada, pero bueno, gracias.
Yeah, just getting them promoted real quick here. Sorry about that.
Thank you. That was it. And to be assigned.
Thank you. Okay, let's go and review our community agreements. Remember that there are several pages. Next page, please. Before we pass to the last page, I know you're still reading, just because for the time we are and how things are going, I want to highlight two community agreements this time. They're all important, right? That's why we read it every time, and hopefully we reflect on it. But I want to highlight the honor the decisions of the group, even if they are not your preferred outcome. It is very hard, but we need to move on. We need to finish with this work that you have been committed. And this honor the decisions of the group, even if they're not your preferred outcome. You might not personally agree with every decision. And I just want you to focus on that, on reflecting that. And the other one is accept non-closure. I know these items are very close to your hearts, and you have put so much time and effort, and you work and you're passionate about it. But just a reminder that we have a deadline and we need to move on, and we need to, yes, have a conversation, ask questions, make edits, but also accept that perfection doesn't exist, and we have to honor the majority of the group and also accept non-closure. Thank you. Next page, please. Okay, I'm gonna ask everyone. Okay. Do we all—
Recording stopped.
Oh. I'm gonna wait for the recording to continue.
Just a moment. I'm going to look into that.
If I can just say something while we're waiting.
Sure.
Just a small thing. I just want to stress my gratitude for staff, as well as all the commissioners and facilitators. This is crunch time, and we're trucking along currently through this meeting simply because we're kind of building it as we're flying with all our notes and everything in the background as well. So again, while Samir is prepping the slides and getting everything up, I just want to say thank you to the staff, the facilitators, as well as all the commissioners for the very, very hard and impressive work that you guys are pushing through right now.
Thank you, Coach Simab. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Okay, now I'm gonna ask the question. Do we all commit to following the community agreements for today's meeting and to gently call in our colleagues and collaborators if needed? And in that case, your hands. And I know everyone will show the whole meeting. Thank you. I will pass it to the co-chair, Simab, to discuss the timeline.
Yeah, greetings, everybody. So we have split our work, as a lot of us know, into 6 phases, and we're currently into the last and final phase, the 6th phase, which is the concluding phase of our work. It'll focus on taking everything that was done in previous phases and converting into proposed changes to city code, the settlement agreement, and approving those for council consideration along with the report. All this basically, we have to package our work by the 31st, end of this month, and we'll be meeting with city council at a time that we're still trying to lock in sometime in September. And as far as outcome documents that we're creating in this phase, it includes proposed changes to the city code, final reports to the commission, which will include some explanation and rationales for the legal text, recommendations for the board's bylaws or the bureau policies, recommended changes to the settlement agreement, and recommended changes to other levels of government, such as city council. Now, the project plan for the concluding phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work, this slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase. When we go to the screen with the blue boxes in the public meetings, there we go. So the blue boxes are the public meetings. The pink boxes are the consultations with the Police Accountability Commission's city attorneys. And today's meeting falls into the blue box right in the middle of the screen with the purple square around it. Yeah, so following today, the upcoming meetings for the Police Accountability Commission, we'd like to highlight our final meeting, which is going to be with the Police Accountability Commission's community info session. It's our final community info session meeting, and that'll be at the Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs tomorrow evening from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then also until our concluding date of August 31st, we are meeting every Monday and Thursday from 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. with some meetings running long, which they will until August 31st. The next meeting is Thursday, the 24th at 6:30 p.m. and is expected to include our discussions to the drafted final report, pretty much hopefully concluding that. In review of today's meeting purpose, we're going to, members are going to continue reporting back, and then commission will be reviewing several documents with inputs into the ongoing process of the Police Accountability Commission finalizing its recommendations. These documents include the City Council feedback, the final checklist of tasks, the community input tracker, the discussion reports, the equity reviews and values and goals, and staff suggestions based off of gaps, contradictions, or technical edits. This will include report backs from members who volunteered to report back on some of these documents as well. Following that, there'll be continued discussion on the draft code recommendations of the commission. As you know, this is one of the 2 items the commission has to finalize before concluding its work. And our timeline is to discuss 7 proposed changes today before going into the executive session, with 4 remaining ones to discuss next Monday, as well as any last minute proposed changes received between now and then. Also, finally, later today, we'll also have general public comment, and we welcome the public's input into our work as always. Thank you. Pass it on to our facilitators.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sima. Now, before we start reviewing any document, our next item in the agenda is to review the values and goals, and I will pass it to Esther.
Thank you. So we are going to take a look at the values and goals. This is a document approved by the PAC on March 24th of last year, and it is designed to be both a statement of the values. As you can see in the goals, there's a list of 6 values. Each value has 1 or 2 corresponding goals, and then beyond that, there are several success criteria or considerations, which are self-imposed metrics to evaluate for the PAC to use when evaluating its own work prior to finalizing it. We'll scroll through this relatively quickly here, but just as a side note, that is over 4 pages. This is the second of them, and number 3 and number 5 are split by a page break, so just kind of bear with us here. And after that, we'll ask if any members have anything they'd like to highlight for today's discussion.
Thank you. That concludes this.
And if co-chairs would like to highlight any, or any members like to highlight any of these, I'd be happy to scroll up or down as needed. I see Commissioner Monica.
Hey, you guys, Commissioner Monica Arce. I use she, her pronouns, and the one that's jumping out at me right now is harm reduction. Mostly because we're at the last final steps of this, and I just know that our community has been harmed by the system in the past. And as I read the final code, it just feels like we are going to reach that goal, and it feels like it just feels good to know that hopefully if things happen the way we've envisioned it, that there will actually be harm reduction, which is something that the community hasn't really expected from this process. We've heard a lot of people just be doubtful that it's just going to be the same old thing, but I really, really don't think it's going to be. I think there's so many good things about this work that are going to be different, and I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Yes, Co-Chair Sima.
Yeah, if we can scroll up just a little bit to number 2. Anti-racism it stands out simply because we are trying to correct issues that have been built upon harming people by profiling and identifying them by race, particularly our Black and Brown communities. And so we are looking to build something that will help chip away at the racist structures. And so therefore we have to be an example of and lead in this value in itself. Reflect that, as it says, racism is more than a personal belief system, but is rather an indoctrination system. And you have to dismantle what's in there. And hopefully we can create a system that will identify these through an accountability process.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sima. Any more comments? Okay, if it's okay with the staff and the co-chairs, we can continue with the next item and the agenda. Okay, we'll now move to discussing the update draft of the city code recommendations. I will pass it to the co-chairs.
All right. Well, this is the product that we've been working on for more than 18 months, and we have gone through some pieces of it. We had some like 9 lingering pieces that we didn't finish at our meeting on Thursday, and then we identified 12 others, but don't worry, they're not too deep to go through today. So I'm going to kind of, because staff has all that at their fingertips, I'm going to let them bring us to each section, and then I'll kind of describe the problem and background, and then we'll have Commissioner Michelle Wesley read the text into the record for us to approve or not approve. And there are going to be some things that are technical fixes that the staff will tell you about that we're just going to say, those are technical fixes. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. We ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitated, and remember we use a weighted stack in our discussions. And finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. Who would you like us get started? The co-chairs, I will pass it back to them.
Right, so I don't know if staff heard my request. I think if you can just bring us to each one and stop the screen there, and then when there's a technical edit, if you just want to explain it, that'd be great. And then when it's something that requires a little discussion, I'd like to do a little background and then have Commissioner Co-Chair Michelle Wesley read it in. So are people ready to take us through this?
Yes, sorry, just working on audio here. right. That should be visible. So there are 24 items total, 3 of which are just for just to be shown on screen, and then will be essentially, in the interest of transparency, showing a co-chair's rewording. We're generally going top to bottom, but there are 3 of them that'll be a little out of order here, just because there's some ideas that work together but are in 2 different places. So there'll be a jump down and jump back up. We'll start in line 79 up here. So this is in 35A.010, and it's in the section related to the bylaws. And it was flagged for further discussion during the meeting on Thursday, the 17th. I'll pass it to co-chairs.
All right. So we finalized the part about the copies being posted on the website. The item in question has to do with whether the bylaws changes are going to be effective upon their adoption or not, and giving the board flexibility to say that they want them to go into effect some other time. And so I don't remember why we left this off, but Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, would you read the exact text into the record and see if there's any discussion through the facilitator? Thanks.
Certainly. Okay, unless stated otherwise by the board, all bylaws changes are effective upon adoption.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from as it is or was to the proposed changes? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Thank you. Can we move on? Thank you.
Thank you. So the next item is in line 394. I'll just scroll kind of quickly here. So this is in the long 35A.050, which is the powers and duties list. And this is a proposed edit that was discussed and then flagged for further discussion on Thursday, with the addition of just the terminology addition highlighted at the top. I'll pass it over to co-chairs. Thanks.
Yeah, so you may remember what happened was we found that the whole section on undesirable police-related outcomes had been dropped out of the code, and we put it back in, but it was a big blob. So we've broken it down into smaller subsections, so it looks more like the other code. It's easier to follow. And I will ask my co-chair to read this into the record if it doesn't exhaust you. Thank you.
Okay, P. Review of undesirable police-related outcomes, Sentinel event reviews, separate from an investigation regarding individual officer misconduct and any related disciplinary action being proposed. The board may initiate forward-looking root cause systemic reviews of undesirable police-related outcomes and develop recommendations for preventing reoccurrence through continuous process improvements. Okay, 1, the review may involve representatives from law enforcement, the judicial branch, forensics, board members, civil rights lawyers, members of the public, and other relevant participants. The board may consider provisions to require participation in these reviews. 2, the board will take public comment throughout the process. 3, the board will issue a report at the conclusion of the review, which may include proposed policy recommendations. And sorry, my kitten is meowing at the door.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits to P1, 2, 3? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was and adding to the proposed change of this section in red? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
the third change is, the third change is down in section, the same section actually, it's just a page lower, on the reporting and transparency documents contents, which are translated into the list of mandatory sections of the annual report. And it is going to cross a page break here, so a proposed inclusion of more information into the settlement information. Thank you.
All right. So for those of you tuned in to our last episode, we had a proposal about adding some language that came from a community member, and we hadn't quite got the language the way we wanted. So we are hoping that this language will fulfill the desire of what we wanted to add in, and I will let the co-chair read it, and then we can have discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Little p. Number, nature, and settlement amount of civil suits against PPP officers, regardless of whether the city is a defendant in the litigation, and the amount of time, the cost incurred by the city attorney, risk management, and other city offices for each settlement.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Yes, Commissioner Sophia.
I'm sorry, I cannot, for some reason, I cannot see that on my screen, the edit, so I just wanted to see that first before I made a comment. I'm just having some issues, so right now, okay. All right.
Commissioner Sophia, would you like us to read it again?
Yes, please.
Co-Chair Charlie, would you like to read it, or you want me to?
I can read it, and I can point out the part we are adding.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so number, nature, and settlement amount of civil suits against PPP officers, regardless of whether the city is a defendant in the litigation. And then here's what is being added, and the amount of time, the costs incurred by the city attorney, risk management, and other city offices for each settlement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there is a question on the chat by Commissioner Aj as well.
Commissioners, did that fix the screen share? Okay. Yeah, that's odd. Happy to, at any point, stop and restart, because that's all I just did. So, yeah, great.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Sophia, your hand is still up. Would you like to comment? No? Okay. Then if it's not, for some reason, the Spanish interpreter cannot see it. I can see it fine, but yeah, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, oh, she said she can see it. Okay, thank you. Yes, she can. Thank you. Okay, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the next thing is down, overshot it here. It's on the background check related text, which the commission has talked about a few times, but has been reworked. And so there are a couple pieces here that are new, but most of this is simply reconfiguring, reorganizing the section. So it starts at line 716, and we'll try to show, actually let's just try and show as much of it as possible at this, on the same screen. Yeah. Can maybe get it into 2 screens that way. Thank you.
All right, so we got somewhere, we made some progress on this last Monday, and then we had some discussions in between meetings, and have worked through this, and we think we came up with something that is threading that needle between what we know we could end up with if we leave it to the city to design a background check, and what we would like to see it say. And so that's where we're at with all this. And I mean, to some extent, the crossed out blue sentence at the end of the first paragraph, that was something that came up and got deleted in between the meetings, so we can ignore that too. So yeah, then so co-chair Michelle Wesley, I know this is a very personal, meaningful section to you. Do you want to read it into the record or have somebody else do it?
No, I'd like to. And shall I read all of it? Are we going to, or are we gonna do it?
Yeah, I anticipated that question. I think what you should do is read through the whole thing, 1 through 4, because they're all interconnected, and then maybe we can just approve the parts that's on the screen here through 1 and 2, and then we'll do 3 and 4.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Okay, so yes, C, background check. Prior to nominating any applicant to the city council for appointments to the board, potential nominees will undergo a criminal background check. The primary purpose of this background check is to ensure that board members may access police databases and facilities necessary to perform their duties. Background checks are not intended to be used to exclude people who have important lived experience from service on the board. Or little 1, whatever. Staff shall initiate a criminal background check through an agency other than the PPB or an agency used by PPB for its checks. In the blue, is this what we're adding now? Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand it, but I think it's the appropriate language to have here.
Okay. Other than the Oregon State Police. 2. When the substance of an offense that led to a previous conviction would impact the applicant's ability to perform their duties if appointed, the nominating entity shall discuss with the prospective board member about how they would respond to concerns that they are unable to fully discharge their duties. The board may also request a review of the criminal record in question by the appropriate law enforcement entity to determine whether to grant a waiver to allow the applicant to have access to law enforcement databases. And if you could scroll up. Thank you. 3, the nominating entity may opt to pass an applicant's nomination to city council after this conversation and review. The nominating entity will not consider convictions such as misdemeanors, but shall only consider convictions which would impact the applicant's ability to fully perform their duties if appointed. Okay, so we're going to do the 1 and 2 together, correct?
Correct.
Let's let Victoria lead us in a discussion first.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I will ask, even if co-chair Charlie read the whole section, I'm gonna ask only for what we can see right now on the camera, on the computer. And I will ask if there is any questions, comments, or edits just for this section. Yes, I will pass it to Commissioner Jumi.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank everyone for their hard work. I know this has been probably one of our most difficult passages to work on. I think I was the one who made the suggestion. I think I understand Commissioner Dan, his comment about number I here. I think it sort of sounds like a double negative when we say other than the state police after we've said through an agency other than the PPB. So I wonder, with Jenny's blessing, if we can change that to something like accepting the Oregon State Police, staff shall initiate. So maybe put it at the beginning.
I'm sorry, I was typing something else and I missed your suggestion. Can you restate it for me, please?
Yeah, I think Dan and I were bumping on the fact that the way this is worded, an agency other than the PPB, and then it goes on to say other than Oregon State Police is sort of a double negative or a double other. So I'm just trying to figure out if there's a acceptable language, maybe saying, oh, I'm not sure. Is an agency other than the PPB or an agency. Yeah, I was going to suggest that maybe we say at the beginning, with the exception of the Oregon State Police, which we know has to do this work.
Yeah, I think so. It would read, with the exception of the Oregon State Police, staff shall initiate a criminal background check through an agency other than PPB or an agency used by PPB for its checks. Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jenny.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I will pass it to Commissioner Fate.
Hi. Yeah, I want to echo Commissioner Yume's sentiments. I know that we've really wrestled with this, so I appreciate the work that the co-chairs and staff have done. I think one thing that is giving me a little bit of solace in this compromise is our opportunity to write a minority report, which we have not talked about yet formally as the commission. And one of my recommendations, I think, for us would be to voice how we wanted it initially in the minority report. And so I'm just putting that out there. But I have no problems with the way it's currently written. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fate. Commissioner Sophia?
I just had a question about if someone could give me an example of another agency that the police bureau would use for background checks. I'm just wondering what that is, and I don't know if we should consider is there anything to consider in that? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. I will pass it to Commissioner Monica, and then we'll see if you can provide the information you request.
I'm still a little bit confused about the wording. And I don't know if this is what we're trying to say. Is it staff shall initiate a criminal background check and shall use an agency other than the PPB, the Oregon State Police, or an agency used by PPB for its checks? Is that what we're trying to say? No. Or am I misunderstanding our point?
Yeah. I will pass it to Commissioner Jumi, and then to staff to answer the questions.
Okay. So I think, based on my understanding, I think the original intent of this language was to say that the PPB is not going to be the agency that is running this background check process. And that also goes for any of their third-party vendors that they might use. The exception to that, and the reason that we're now kind of going back and forth on this language, is that one of the primary vendors that the PPB uses is the Oregon State Police to determine if you're allowed to access the Criminal Justice Information System, or CJIS. And we have to use them because they're the only arbitrating body for that specific form of access. So what we're trying to say here is, and I think Samir and I were going back and forth on maybe cleaning up this language a little bit, but what we're trying to say here is, hey, we understand that you have to use OSP for CJIS, but we don't want the Bureau running any other component of the background check, and we don't want one of their normal vendors doing that work either, because they may have more sort of loyalty to the Bureau than to the new body. And I think this goes to the fact that in the current system, if your background check comes back denied, the Bureau will not tell you why. And so we're trying to make sure that we're building in a more transparent system.
Thank you, Commissioner. Staff, would you like to, I will pass it to Commissioner Dan first.
Well, I think that answers the question that I had about it. So, except I would suggest then we put the only exception is that staff may initiate a criminal background check through the Oregon State Police. And that way we're making it clear that that's the exception, and that's why it seems contradictory.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Monica?
I also wanted to comment to Commissioner Faith's suggestion that these thoughts get put into our minority report. Except that it seems like the majority of us have been feeling like this is a really sad situation that we have to put into this. So maybe a majority report that the law did not permit us to put in because of the way the system has already been constructed, and there are some things that we can't change about the system. But that was my thought on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Commissioner Sophia.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that or agree that I feel that we should just say with the exception of the state, Oregon State Police, because the other part just made it more confusing to me. And then the other comment to follow up with Commissioner Monica and Faith is that I wanted to say that, you know, this is an issue because we know that a lot of people have been wrongly accused or not giving a proper defense in some of these cases, and has put them in these positions. The system has put them in this position now where we have to try and find a way to use our resources appropriately with our community members and their information. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there any additional comments, questions, or suggestions? And Commissioner Sophia, would you like to add something? Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the new proposed change? And I remember I asking for number 1 and number 2 as well as the background check. Okay. Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Let's move on to the number 3 and number 4. Commissioner Casey, are you agreeing or you have questions?
Sorry, that was just left over from my agreement.
Okay, thank you. Don't worry about it. I just don't want to miss any of you. You have questions. Thank you. Okay, can we move on to 3 and 4? Okay.
I think we may be waiting for staff to just note the approval in there. There we go.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Cece, cut. Cut it. I said cut it.
Commissioner Sophia, your microphone is on.
So sorry.
It's okay. Okay. Number 3 and 4, they was already read through the record. I'm gonna ask if you have any questions, comments, or edits for number 3 and number 4. Yes, staff. Oh, I'm sorry. Staff, can I pass it to Commissioner Tim and then to you? Commissioner Tim.
Yeah, thanks. Unless I'm missing something, I personally just don't understand how the level of a conviction is relevant. So I wonder if we need to say the nominating entity will not consider convictions such as misdemeanors, because frankly, I would argue that there are a number of felony convictions that are also completely irrelevant to a person's ability to do their job. So I wonder if we need that first section, or if we couldn't just say that the nominating entity shall only consider convictions which would impact the applicant's ability to fully perform their duties if appointed.
Thank you. And I will pass it to staff and then Co-Chair Dan.
Thank you. Yes, actually, the comment was on the same thing. Given what Commissioner Yume had brought up about CGI, CGIS access, there's a concern about any conviction that might deny access. Then the CGIS policy does include that misdemeanors may be disqualifying. Just as a note, and I'll put the link in the chat for that in a moment.
Thank you, staff. Co-Chair Dan.
Okay, well, that was news to me, so I'll change my response. But just Commissioner Pitts, we had the language the way it was before, and it seemed to be confusing that, this is supposed to be restricting the board from looking at any other convictions that have nothing to do with the access to these databases, right? So that's the point of this sentence. So I was trying to put some kind of example in there of what they're not allowed to look at. And now I understand that we can't say misdemeanors, but yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to get back into another double negative, but the nominee will not consider non-disqualifying convictions, but shall only consider convictions which would impact blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if that's applies, but will not consider non-disqualifying convictions, comma, and just get rid of such as misdemeanors.
Thank you to Co-Chair Dan, and I hope you have you are proposing?
Yes, and I just typed that into the chat.
Okay, thank you. And I know Co-Chair Sima wanted to say something. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to let staff go ahead before me. I'm pretty sure that they might have had a relevant response as well, but I'll go after.
Thank you. Staff?
Sorry, I was just trying to clarify, but I scrolled up and saw Commissioner Tim's proposed changes. Trying to get that in first here.
Okay.
So that's the proposed changes. Was trying to get that in and there. Sorry.
It's okay.
staff, that's not where my proposed change would have gone. So let's look at Commissioner Lewis's suggestion, I think.
Is there any additional comments? There is something from Co-Chair Sima on the text, on the chat.
Yeah, just a curiosity, reflecting on suggestions when we were developing code, not to make sure that we reduce as much as possible, or try not to include examples in our code, which kind of makes this part difficult. But I'm not sure if that advice would apply to this part as well. I just want to kind of consider that and check people's opinion on it.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sima. Is there any? Yeah, staff is putting page A, 3B. If there is, I don't know, you would like to continue discussing 3 and 4, but if not, I would like to ask the question, if is that okay with co-chairs? Okay, thank you. And again, I'm asking for 3 and 4 together. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Okay, thank you. Can we move on?
Facilitator Laura, is this a good time to take a break, since we just went through a 20-minute, very exhausting thing, and then come back to the other 17 items?
Of course, we can do that. Of course, Co-Chair Dunn. It is 7:40. Let's take 10 minutes break and come back at 7:50. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
you. Let's continue reviewing the document.
Thank you. So the next item, this is number 5 out of 21, is related to performance reviews for the Auditor, Monitor, Inspector General. It's in section 35C.020. And it's both of these two parts together. Thank you.
All right, well, I don't know if staff is unmuted, but this is a section that has to do with the hiring of the Auditor, Monitor, Inspector General, and the hiring of the legal counsel. And we had suggested that the board be involved in the performance reviews for them, and this is just adding in language about that from the areas of agreement. So Chair Michelle Wesley, do you want to read 1B and 2A?
Certainly. Okay, 1B. Board members will be involved in the hiring of an auditor, monitor, inspector general, and participate in, at minimum, annual performance reviews for the position. 2A, board members will be involved in the hiring of legal counsel and participate in performance reviews for this position.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Then I'm gonna ask for both 1B and 2A. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Thank you.
Thank you. Not sure if my audio is working now.
Okay, so while staff is catching up with the affirming those, the next section is from a very long section of our code that we didn't actually put in there originally, but it comes from another area of city code, and it gives the director the authority to make the rules they need to run the office. And you may all be surprised that when I read through it today, I only found one thing I wanted to change in these 4 paragraphs, which is quite amazing. In the interest of time, I think what we should do is hold this on the screen, and then after about a minute or so, when people have time to read through this whole screen so you can see what is in here, I'll read and explain the proposed change here.
Not sure if my audio's back. Yes, looks like it is. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that this was this text is modeled off of the areas, not the areas agreement, the city code on the Prosper Portland, and it relates to the authority of the director to issue administrative rules, which is something that the PAC has discussed quite a bit with relation to what's going to be in the report, the suggestions to the future office to do those administrative rules. So this is the enabling text for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Co-Chair Dan, you're gonna read it and explain it?
Yeah, I just giving people a chance to kind of skim over the intro paragraph there. So I'm going to read number 1 because that's where the change is. It says, before adopting, amending, or repealing a rule, the director must notify interested party and hold a public comment period. Such notice, which may be provided by mail or electronic means, such as posting on the office's website, must be published at least, and instead of 4 weeks in the original code, I'm proposing 33 days. I'll explain that in a second. 33 days before the close of the public comment period. The notice must include instructions on how the interested party may comment on the proposed rule, a brief description of the subjects covered by the proposed rule, and how to access the full text of the proposed rule. And I came up with 33 days because it's remotely possible that if the new board is having meetings on the first Wednesday of every month, that one meeting will be on the X number day of the month, and the next meeting will be on X number day of the month, and it could be as far as 32 days apart. So if you say 33 days, then no matter what happens, the director's rule has to come up during a monthly meeting of the board. That's why I'm proposing that.
Okay, is there any comments or questions? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on?
Yeah, and if I can ask staff, maybe if you can just scroll down a little bit so we can see numbers 2, 3, and 4. And again, just, so people can keep, it's just 2 and 3. Sorry, there was an intro paragraph from 1, 2, and 3. So facilitator Laura, I'll invite you to ask if anybody has any discussion, but since there's no changes from the code we got given to us, just see if anybody has discussion on it.
Okay, I will. Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Even if there are not changes on 2 and 3, is there any discussion, comments, or questions? Okay. Can we move on? Thank you.
Okay, so the next item, number 7 of 21, is under staff community engagement, and this is text directly from the areas of agreement on oversight staff about the oversight system, educating law enforcement and bargaining unit representatives about its work.
Great, thanks, staff. And just for the record, the co-chairs put out a call late Friday and said, can people take different sections of the code and go through it? And Commissioner Pitts went through this section and discovered that this hadn't made it in from the areas of agreement. So thank you, Commissioner Pitts, and thanks to everybody else who took sections of the code to look through. And Commissioner, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, would you like to read this into the record?
Certainly. H, the oversight system shall conduct education on its activities for law enforcement personnel and bargaining unit representatives.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits to H? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to adding H as a proposed change? Is there a general agreement to adding H as a proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I was going to say that the next two, 8 and 9 and 9.5, are all part of the same concept, and I'm going to let staff walk through it because there's just so many little pieces. So I'm going to turn it over to you, staff, to explain all this.
Thank you. So this all relates to most of the text had previously related solely to, or had made effectively an assumption that all of the police bureau employees that would be subject to the jurisdiction of the oversight board would be represented by a collective bargaining unit. And so this text relates entirely to broadening the language for those members or those officers that are not part of a collective bargaining unit at PPB. So there's a section up under basic elements of administrative investigations, which is the highlighted in yellow portion here. And this is sort of the general, definition. And then there is a longer form, which I can show in a minute after everyone's had a chance to read this. Okay, so we'll go down here to quite a ways down. Oh, sorry. And it's the blue text here beginning, so it's under discipline and corrective action 35D.230. And it includes clarifying the just cause definition that it pertains to represented employees, clarifies that the due process hearing right is for represented employees, but that the board may elect to provide a due process hearing to non-represented officers. And then having just clarifying language, applicable, consistent with applicable law, applicable guide, etc. So I'll just I'll do a quick scroll through. This was just a quick scroll through, so now we'll give everyone a chance to read this for a minute. And that's everything. Happy to scroll to any particular part. And I think these were split up, so if facilitators could ask for the two parts separately, that might be helpful.
Yes, of course. We can go to the first part and I can ask the question. Is there any comments, questions, or edits? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on to the next part? Thank you. Okay, for the second part, is there any comment, questions, or edits? You know, I'm gonna ask three, I'm gonna separate, that way we can just approve what we can see on the screen. And then the next, we will approve the next part. I'm asking just 5A and B. Yes, Commissioner June.
I feel like we talked about this at the very end of the last meeting, and so I apologize if we cleared this up. I just want to make sure that the section, the board may elect to provide a due process hearing to a non-represented sworn officer, doesn't create some sort of disparate treatment situation. Is it under certain criteria, or does that matter?
Thank you, Commissioner. Co-Chair Dan or staff, would you like to answer the question?
Oh, well, I want to make sure that the board doesn't get accused of treating, officers differently. But I feel like what's going to happen is that they'll come to a set of norms, and they'll probably end up doing the same thing for everybody.
Yes. Staff?
Yeah, so they do have different employment statuses just in terms of being, at will versus kind of like a previous conversation about the nature of the director position. Like there are different types of employment at the city, and so there are differences just in terms of the types of employment that each of these individuals have. But yeah, I think my recollection of the conversation around this last sentence was that the idea was to at least enable the option of treating of identical practice.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. And Commissioner Yumi also wrote something.
I was just gonna say, I wonder if we can make it clear that they're saying they can elect to provide to have a process for that, as opposed to, I read this as saying that they would make that decision for individual officers, which it doesn't sound like is the intent.
Thank you. Commissioner Monica.
Shall we say maybe that the okay, wait a second, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Non-representative sworn officers may request that the board provide a loudermilk hearing, and the board will make a decision, maybe, or so put it on the non-representative employee to request this.
Yes, staff.
So stepping back for a second, one of the challenges associated with this particular meeting and having a lot of things come up is that there hasn't been a chance to run this by attorneys. Anything that isn't in the document already. So if you're seeing the text in, red and blue, for the most part, it has been to some degree run by attorneys. So I think this may be a general statement that there will be some text that'll be effectively approved pending legal review, similar to 2 public meetings ago, maybe 3 public meetings ago, that was noted in a lot of this, the 10th and the 14th to be specific. With relation to this text, it may be that I'm not a lawyer, but it may change the nature of the structure to have it be the discretion of the board versus the discretion of the individual. So that just might be a reason to look into it more. That's not a reason to do it or not to do it, just to kind of just note that would need to be legally vetted in some way.
Thank you. Commissioner Dan, Co-Chair Dan.
Thank you. So I just posted in the chat to narrow down what Commissioner Delgado proposed. And I believe Commissioner Arce that this covers that. So one of the criteria could be if the officer asks for it, but we'll let them deal with that since we can't answer that question tonight. So my proposed language is the board shall establish criteria for providing a due process hearing to a non-represented sworn officer of the Portland Police Bureau, period.
Thank you. Okay, is there an additional questions, comments, or edits? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong, yeah.
Oh, sorry, there, Laura, the new language isn't in there yet.
Okay, okay. And in the meantime, Commissioner Ajay.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the benefit is to saying the board shall establish criteria as opposed to may. I'm fine with shall establish the criteria, but I was just curious if someone could explain yeah, the benefit over may establish criteria.
Thank you, Commissioner Ajay. Staff?
Yeah, if it's okay, I'd like to, Victoria, I'd like to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Attorney. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the distinction with shall, which I think you all have done a good job of in the proposed code of distinguishing between shall and may, is that shall obligates the board to do something. And in this context, inserting shall here would obligate the board to do something that they don't otherwise have to do. You know, I don't want to waive legal privilege, but that's sort of the distinction here between shall and may. And I would encourage you all to think about that very carefully. And as staff mentioned, many of these changes I have not had a chance to look at. And so I can't offer meaningful input on them. But I'm doing the best I can.
Thank you, Jenny. I will pass it again to Commissioner Ajay.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I guess I was wondering if, yeah, my question was sort of more about like, what is the benefit to mandating this as opposed to offering it as an option? Yeah, if anyone has thoughts about that.
Thank you. Co-Chair Dan.
Right. Well, the shall here is referring to establishing criteria. It's not that they're going to provide the due process hearings. It's saying that, you know, it could be something that's makes it very difficult for it to happen if it's something they don't want to do. I just think that may establish criteria is not a great. I mean, it's sort of it's two steps beyond providing this hearing. But if people feel like we should put may, then let's put may.
Thank you. I can ask the question just for the shall, or unless I see that. Oh, I can ask the question altogether. Okay. Are there any more edits? Yes, Co-Chair Charlie.
So what if they choose not to because we're using the word may? What does that mean? Can anyone answer that? Does that negate like the whole thing then? I'd like to understand that better.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Commissioner Jumi.
That's a good question, Commissioner Charlie, and I'm sure Dan will or staff will join in if I'm doing a bad job of describing this. But I think the idea here is that we are under no obligation to provide a due process hearing to non-represented at-will employees. But but in the interest of fairness and creating a system that kind of treats, represented and unrepresented employees alike, we want to provide the option to have that structure in place for commanders and assistant chiefs and deputy chiefs, right? That being said, we don't necessarily want to obligate the new board to do a specific thing. And so we're trying to say, hey, you can provide this, right? You can choose to make this happen, but we're going to leave it to you to set the criteria for that, since you are not legally obligated to do so. I mean, I think we're being generous, and I think it's good for us to be generous in a way on this front, because we want to have a consistently, fair process here. But because we're not legally obligated to do it, I think it is good to leave a little, I don't want to say ambiguity, but leave some flexibility there for the board to determine what they want to do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, if there's no more discussion, it was your question, Co-Chair Charlie, answer? Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna ask the question for everything we're seeing right now in this screen, on the screen. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there, Commissioner Casey?
Yeah, I think I just on principle don't like making, I mean, I'm okay with the established criteria language, but the shall to may, I'm not liking making these changes without having an opportunity to run them by our legal counsel. And I think that this is a case in which mandating it creates more clarity. Otherwise, I worry.
I will pass it to staff. Thank you, Commissioner Casey. Staff?
So this is one of those examples that we were referring to earlier. Everything that was in blue, which includes the word may, was previously in the document leading into this meeting and was in fact vetted already. If there were to be a shall, then that would be approved pending legal review. But the earlier version, which had the word may in it, did have had already been run by attorneys. I don't know if that answers the question, Commissioner Casey.
It does. I'm seeing may in green on my document, so I must have misremembered it.
Yeah, it got wiped as part of it.
If it's already been vetted, I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey. Okay, I'm gonna ask again. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you.
So now we have the bottom half of this that we still have to look at. We can get on to number 10, 9.5.
Yeah, so this continues on, and there's just an applicable collective bargaining agreement here, and everything else can fit onto the page, I think. Yeah. So just it ends where the screen ends now.
You ready to ask the questions, Facilitator Laura?
Yes, I'm ready. Is there any questions, comments, or edits to this second part we're reviewing? Is there a general agreement to changing, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? And here is everything you see on the screen. Commissioner Alge.
Oh, I just wanted to see if you saw Commissioner Delgado's hand.
Oh, thank you. I didn't. Thank you for bringing it up. Commissioner Jimmy?
Yeah, I've really paid to do this, but just in the interest of making this document as legible as possible. And I guess I'll also defer to staff if this means it has to get sent back for a review. I'll withdraw this suggestion, but I'm just thinking number C, in all cases in reaching a discipline decision. I'm not sure if that sounds a little confusing to people. It might be good to say for all cases or in reaching a discipline decision for all cases, something that way we don't have in twice in a row there. That's just my only suggestion.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Staff?
Just to answer the question, I don't think it would necessarily need to go back. I would suggest when for the second in, if that might help in all cases when reaching a discipline decision or as part of or something like that. And I think the other thing I should mention just for future reference is that between this meeting and the final approval, there'll be a lot of chances to do some of the really smaller cases of wordsmithing as well. So don't feel like you have to do it right now if there'll be an opportunity in the future as well. But for this one, happy to get it fixed in here.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jimmy wrote something in the chat as a suggestion. Thank you. Okay, now I'm gonna ask the question again. Oh, Commissioner Sima, you want add it?
Yeah, just why the first comma even in all cases reaching a discipline decision?
Yes, Co-Chair Dan.
Yeah, I think the when is good, and we should probably just leave this and move on if we can. That's all right, Co-Chair Husseini.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna leave it like that. Remember, we are having consensus for everything is on the screen. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Thank you.
Thank you. So the next item here, this is jumping back up. So this is the first of three things, which is not actually a proposed change, just a take a look and be aware that co-chairs made this rewording. And it is here. So the first part of it is the highlighted here. The second part of it is moving the content of this lowest part up to the middle part here. And these are technical edits, so this is, again, not for a decision by the PAC, just a, we're just going to show it on screen for 15 seconds or so everyone can see it, be aware of what happened, and then move on to the next item.
Right, so just as a brief explanation, the intro E didn't make sense in terms of the grammar between that and part one, and then as staff said, that second part, the second thing in red in number one was kind of floating underneath C, but so we put it up there in number one.
Okay, we'll go down.
Okay. Yes. Move on.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll go down to the next item, which is still under the same section, 35D.010, basic elements of an administrative investigation. So this is another rewording here as well. Sorry about that. Same idea as the one before. Okay. So moving into the 10th item of 21 here, we've got line. Yeah. So there's a proposed change here to add in and continue until resolved.
Thank you.
Right, and this is to line up the areas of agreement with the code text. And I'm going to ask Co-Chair Michelle Wesley to read the whole A into the record.
Okay, 35D 020 or 020A. Investigation shall be completed within 6 months. Investigations may extend past 6 months and continue until resolved, consistent with applicable law.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits to A? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question for A. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on to D? Yes, okay, thank you.
Thanks. So the next one, and just to quickly note, this is not part of it down below. This is a technical edit. It's only D, but there's a proposed change to this text about who gets informed if an investigation goes beyond the 180-day normal timeline.
Thank you, staff. Co-Chair Charlie, would you like to read D?
The investigative staff shall inform the board, the complainant, and their assigned complaint navigators, and the officer or officers and their support persons if an investigation goes beyond the mandated timeline. They shall also inform the officer's supervisor, the chief of police, and other officials who may be involved in the discipline process.
Thank you. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on to the next? Thank you.
Okay, so the next item is technical edit. Technical edit. So this is another one. This is the second of 3 that we're showing just to show what happened. It's a rewording. And this relates to complaints which are outside the board's jurisdiction, and the default being that if an officer files a complaint, it would not go to the oversight board, but that if they choose to request it, they can do so. And this text was already approved. It's just been reworded. Okay, we'll go to the 12th item of 21. Technical edits. Okay, so this is part of section 35D090 on intake, and it relates to the officer, in the event that an officer is a complainant, who they have access to, and it's a rewording to revert back to the areas of agreement text.
Brian, just as a brief explanation, when we had the discussion about this section, I think I was the one that pointed out that the officer may not take the attorney from their bargaining unit. So we don't want to say where the attorney came from, I think, and that's what the proposal is about. And so Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, would you like to read this into the record as proposed?
Sure. D, if the complainant is an officer who already has the automatic ability to have a bargaining unit representative and an attorney, or bargaining representative, if applicable, they can also bring a peer officer or community member of their choosing who is not a witness to the incident. This means they may also have as many as 3 support people.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Jimmy.
I think maybe we're missing a comma. So is it supposed to be, if the complainant is an officer who already has the automatic ability to have a bargaining unit representative, comma, an attorney and or bargaining representative, if applicable, they can also, yeah, I think we just have I'm not sure where the duplication is, but I think we're repeating ourselves here.
Yes, Co-Chair Dan.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure how this happened, but you're absolutely right. So I think it should say automatic ability to have a bargaining representative, if applicable, at the top, and an attorney, and then cut out the and or bargaining unit representative. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. It is any other suggestions? No? Okay. Do you have any edits, concerns, or questions? I know, Co-Chair Charlie, you didn't read E. Maybe I interrupt you, but is that okay if we can ask for everything we see on the screen? I can ask the question. Oh, I only gonna ask for D. Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. And all the other changes were just technical. I don't have to ask for it. Thank you. Can we move on?
Thanks. So the next one.
So I'd like to point to something that the staff put in the chat to us a little bit ago, that we're down to our last 4 meetings. I'm getting all weepy now. So we're down to our last 4 meetings, and it's likely that there are more changes like the ones that you're seeing tonight, where all that the co-chairs are proposing is technical edits or reinserting language from the areas of agreement that don't affect the underpinning legal issues that we were getting at. And we'll probably need to ask your permission, looking at the bylaws, for the co-chairs to be able to get those put into this code between now and when we vote on it, because we have to get to the report, and we have to get to the minority report still, and then we have to approve everything and get it off to council. So I'll probably ask for that permission when we get to the end of this process, and after we run through the draft report as well. Okay, so where are we now? Yeah, so this is also, so this is what made me think of this in 35D100. This is about when the board receives complaints, But as we've discussed many times, there's complaints that come automatically based on what's written in the charter. So, and this language is in the areas of agreement, and so I'm hoping there's no opposition to it, but we're just adding this language that's already in the areas of agreement to account for those other kinds of cases. Chair Michelle Wesley, would you like to read this into the record?
B, when the board receives a complaint regarding alleged misconduct of a Portland Police Bureau officer or a supervisor thereof, or opens a case not originating from a complaint, staff shall. Do you want me to read all those?
No, but you should read number 4 because it's the same change, just in a different place.
And number 4, if appropriate for a full investigation, identify the complainant's allegations or possible types of misconduct. And
thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Okay. And let me ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so the next one after this, so that was actually technically 2 of them, and we'll get to the third. Let's see, that's a technical edit. There's a couple places where advocate was changed to complaint navigator. Technical edit.
Yeah, you had it in mediation and you moved back past it.
Oh. Here.
And okay.
That's not it actually. It's here. It's this bottom one. Sorry. So this section enabling cases dismissed that have been dismissed for one reason to be considered for mediation or informal complaint, and this change would add a second reason. Refers to B4 above. So B3 is already eligible, and the addition would allow B4 to be reasons for, or to be mediated even though the case was otherwise dismissed.
Yeah, so just to be absolutely clear here, I'm not 100% sure where the E came from, which allowed some dismissals to go to the informal resolution, but we just wanted to add this other kind of dismissal where they think it's not, doesn't rise to the level of needing a full investigation to go to those kinds of informal resolutions. So I don't know if we even need to read it in because it's just saying B4, which doesn't give you the full concept of what B4 means. But perhaps, yeah, perhaps, and yeah, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, maybe you should just read it in for the record so we have it on the transcript.
do you want me to read what B4 is as well?
Yeah, why don't we do that first, and then we'll scroll down to E. So staff, can you go back up to B4?
Okay, so B4, what we'll be talking about in a second, even if all aspects of the complaint were true, the misconduct would be so minor that the matter would be better addressed through other means. And then scroll back down. Okay, E, dismissals based on B3 and B4 will be considered for mediation or informal complaint.
Okay, any questions, comments, or edits? Okay, I'm gonna ask, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Yes, Coach Dan?
All right, so I am seeing, so we do have 6 more items to do. And just for the record, the thing that I asked staff to stop on has to do with the mediation, the signatures on the mediation agreement. And there were just a couple of words that got left out when we were voting on it last time, or consenting on it. Just to make sure that it's about the substance of the mediation and not the substance of the agreement that can be disclosed. So that's just for the record what that was. So we have 6 more things to do. We have to do public input, and we have to do to the extent that we have some draft final report to look at, and the work that Commissioner Aiken and I got done about the city memo. And so I'm guessing we're probably going to go over by about 15 minutes tonight. And I wonder if anybody is completely has a complete and strong objection to that before we probably run over. Okay, I think we knew that we were going to be running. Oh, why is my camera off? I wonder.
Yes, your camera hasn't been on, Co-Chair.
It's not. It won't let me. Oh, it got unplugged. I had no idea. I apologize to everybody, including the people watching this video. It got unplugged by accident. Okay, so yeah, thank you. Let's just plan to run a little late. Thanks.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan.
Great. So the next one on here, this is item 16 out of 21. Whoops. Okay, so this one was discussed sort of conceptually, and it's sort of a placeholder text. Previously, there was a conversation around bylaws and enabling the board to provide, to clarify in its bylaws what the voting thresholds would be for the board as a whole, subcommittees, panels, etc. And there was a question raised as to whether or not the PAC should define specifically the voting threshold for panels as it relates to what the standard of how many members would need to vote in favor of a specific finding, applying a specific finding in order to do so. So this was placed as a placeholder. There was no proposed change as of yet. So if a member would like to make a proposal to put something here, then that would put, a voting threshold into the code. If not, then it would remain with the bylaws, with the board in its authority to set its own bylaws to establish that voting threshold for panels. And this would apply, the specific place you're looking at right now is in 35D200, which is the findings panel. The main panel there, the hearings panel, I think is what it's called in the text, but it would also apply to appeals panels because the appeals panel text refers to this section. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Debbie and then Co-Chair Dan.
So I thought you asked for people to email their thoughts on this after the last meeting. Did you get any feedback?
Yes, I believe that you gave some feedback, Commissioner Iona.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Was I the only one?
Well, we had a couple of responses, but why don't you make your suggestion into the record?
If I remember right, it's been a few days, so who knows? It was I think I suggested a simple majority of whatever the quorum is. But
Mayor doesn't do this.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. You said simple majority of the panel, not the quorum. So that it would be, so in other words, if the quorum's a majority of 5 people, let's say, and they have to have 3 there, then it has to be all 3 of them to vote for it in the way that you phrased it. So, and I'm going to just kind of pitch here why I support Commissioner Iona's proposal, which is that the one thing that both community members and police officers want across the system is consistency. And what I'm afraid of is that if we start off, if the board starts off and sets a threshold and then decides to change the threshold at some point for whatever reason, that is going to create inconsistencies within the system. I appreciate that we're leaving the board's decisions about when it wants to change its bylaws or whatever other decisions they're going to make when they make recommendations. Those are thresholds I'm not that worried about. But for when they're making a decision about an officer's job, I really think that we should put something in writing and make sure it's consistent. Thanks.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Commissioner Casey.
I just want to say I agree with Commissioner Iona. That is the threshold that I would support as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey. Commissioner Sophia.
Yes, thank you. I just listening to the reasonings for changing it. I still feel like it should be left up to the board, and I understand the issues with possible inconsistencies, but here we are again, trying to, see something that hasn't happened yet. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Sorry, I was, my microphone was off. Commissioner Yumi, you want to comment on what you put into the chat?
I just want to make sure I was understanding the math there. So if we have a 5-person panel, in order to have quorum, you would need to have 3 people show up. And if I understood what Commissioner Dan was saying, the simple majority would be of the panel members, not of the quorum that showed up. Is that correct?
Yes,
right.
That's
so.
Okay.
Yes, it would be 3 regardless of how many people showed up, but it would be regardless of whether 3, 4, or 5 people showed up. The vote would have to be 3 or more.
Thank you. Staff, Commissioner Sophia?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand. So the panel is going to be the body that's going to be making the discipline decisions, right? So we're saying that 3 people can do that. I just think it seems, especially if you're supposed to have 5 on the board. I know it's a small panel. I understand that, but I'm just looking at the numbers. 3 people can make that decision. And it just seems a little concerning. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional comments or questions? Remember on the community agreements that we have? I just want to remind you. Okay, Commissioner Ajay.
Sorry if this maybe was just asked by Commissioner Yumi, but so if it's not found by a simple majority, that means that the possibilities that there could be 2 and not 3, like if quorum was 5, like the number would be potentially lower if it was by a simple majority of quorum versus if it was just a simple majority. Sorry if I'm not asking this in a coherent way.
No, I think you've asked the question right. But yeah, because we're confusing 2 things, right? The quorum is how many people have to show up for them to be able to hold a meeting, and then the voting threshold that we're discussing is how many people have to vote for it. So yes, we're saying instead of saying by a simple majority of the quorum is a simple majority of the members of the panel, so that it can't be 2 people. It has to be 3 or more people.
Thank you, Coach Dan. Staff, are you going to explain the same thing?
Yep.
Okay. I will need to move on and ask the question because we still have more stuff and there is 8:50. And is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Okay. Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Commissioner Casey, you have your hand is from when you were agreeing. Yes, thank you. Okay.
Okay, so
All
this
right,
is.
so this is
sorry.
This is a section that is in the in E in our last section about recommendations, and we've sort of referred to this in above in a couple of different sections. But it says when the board finds, sorry, Co-Chair Michelle West, it's easier for me to read it than explain it. When the board finds a systemic issue, the board will automatically initiate a policy review, which may include board members and/or staff preparing a proposed policy recommendation for consideration with. By the board as outlined in section 35E. So the systemic issues are, I'm incorrect about what section this is, by the way. We address this again later in that section. This is in the section that's about findings, so this is still in the in D, in the investigations and findings section. Thank you, staff. Systemic issues are, as we went over last time, policy issues, training issues, supervisory issues, communication issues, and equipment issues.
Okay, because there is no changes here. Can we go to the next one? Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna ask the question, is there any comments or edits for D? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on?
Thanks. So the next one is down below. It has to do with the same topical area, and it's lost it somewhere here. Wow. Oh, sorry. This is this text that you're seeing now was previously approved. It was the second half of the non-represented employees part. Technical edits. Okay, so it is not the part that's in paragraph 2, only the parts in 3 and 4. This is 35E.010 on policy recommendations. And it is, these are two different ideas, but they're back to back, so yeah.
Right, so this was the, yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Co-Chair Dan, you're gonna
I thought this is where I thought we were before, where it's talking about the policy issues, and the two sections that are referenced there. One is the I can't even remember the name of it. The thing that we also call Sentinel event reviews, the unpleasant outcomes by police section that we talked about before. And then the other part is the section that we just looked at about the policy issues and training issues and all that. So that's what those two references are. So that's 3. And then I guess staff is encouraging us to do both at the same time. I like that idea. So the second one is about staff initiating a policy review. This also comes directly out of the areas of agreement. This was the section that Commissioner Iona reviewed, and thank you for finding these missing pieces. I'm going to ask Co-Chair Michelle Wesley to read 3 and 4 into the record.
Okay, 3, the board may make policy recommendations based on individual misconduct cases. The board shall initiate a policy review based on any issues identified under section 35A.050P or 35D.210C. 2 or 4 rather. Staff may also initiate policy reviews, including through auditing completed misconduct cases. If the staff initiates a policy review, it shall inform the board and invite participation throughout the process, including submitting a proposed policy recommendation to the board for approval.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? No? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? They're highlighted right now. Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Thank you. Next, can we move on? Okay, I will pass it to staff to explain the next one. The next 3, I think we only need to do 3 more.
Correct. And 2 of them are in this same section on policy recommendations. So one of them is here under paragraph 5, and the other will be down here under B, but we'll do that in a second. So this was proposed as an addition to the text after the report back on the equity reviews by, I believe, Co-Chair Charlie Michelle Wesley. So if you want to speak to that, or if anyone else would like to.
Okay, so you want me to read, okay, 5.
Yeah.
The board may request whatever additional materials and research it believes is necessary to help make an informed decision on a proposed policy recommendation. If needed, the board may rely upon its subpoena power to compel production of the requested information. The board shall have access and be authorized to attend PPP trainings as observers for the purpose of evaluating, monitoring, and making recommendations to the PPP regarding policy and directives. The development of policy recommendations, procedures, or practices will incorporate equity and anti-racist lenses.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. I know there is something on the chat by Co-Chair Dan. Go ahead, Co-Chair Dan.
Right, it's just the thing that we caught earlier from Commissioner Arce that should say regarding training policy and directives. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comments, questions, or edits? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. I'm gonna ask, can we move on? And I'm gonna ask staff to do the next part.
Yeah, so apologies that this one doesn't actually show the old text, but the old text was a proposed addition that then got revised, so it was never in the document yet. But it is this text that you're seeing, part B here, is the areas of agreement text related to how the board would be involved in the directive review process that PPB already runs. I'll pass it over to co-chairs.
So yesterday I went and got some more dry ice.
Yeah.
It was a little cheap.
I think someone has their mic open again.
Yes.
Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, can you read this into the record?
Gladly. B, as part of its policy policymaking authority, the board may facilitate a process for board and community review and development of Portland Police Bureau policies and directives. This includes engagement in the Bureau's directive review and development process. The board shall schedule timelines compatible with the PPB's processes. The board will transmit recommendations on revised and newly proposed policies and directives to PPB and, if necessary, City Council.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any comments, questions, or edits? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Now we'll pass it to staff to take us in the last.
So for those following along, you may have noticed that all the lines go up. It was generally start to finish of this document. There's one left, and that was put out of order. So we'll scroll all the way back up here to the board membership. And this is in under quorum requirements. There's a proposed change here, which is across a couple different places. Just going to make sure. Yeah, it's in 3 different locations. So there's the proposed addition here, the proposed text here, and the proposed text here. And I'll pass it back over to co-chairs.
All right, so co-chairs, I'm going to explain and read this just for as a heads up. So our areas of agreement envisioned a sliding scale quorum that we requested for ourselves to City Council, but they never enacted for us. I have been over and over again the John Hoppe decision that led to the state's rules, and I want to emphasize state's rules, not state law, about how you set quorum. There is nothing, according to their handbook on the state public meetings law, there's nothing describing quorum in the state law. It's all based on administrative procedures and decisions like this one that I posted in the chat. And a close reading of it says that the quorum is based on the number of members that are described in statute. In the case that was in front of the judge that made this decision, it was a board that had 14 members. And so they said, because the statute says you have 14 members, you have to have a quorum of 8 to vote on anything. But that means that the statute can set a different number. So, and that's what we intended to do. Our original language said the board shall consist of 33 members, and I'm proposing the language where quorum is based on the number of seated members, and I'm referring to these other areas that we'll scroll to in a second. Where quorum is based on the number of seated members, the number of members present to vote on this matter should never be less than 10. And I specifically said that, no less than 10, so that means that, in theory, the board should never get whittled down to less than 18 or 19 members, which is where the quorum would be 10. I'm saying this because I watched the Community Oversight Advisory Board not have members appointed by the City Council so that they could have quorum, and eventually they couldn't meet anymore. And I don't want to see this happen to our lovely new board. All right, so let's scroll down to the other part. You would. So to match that language, this is, again, the language we originally had in our areas of agreement. Matters affecting the quorum requirements, number 1, C1, matters affecting the full board, a simple majority of seated board members shall constitute a quorum of the board for decisions about procedures, protocols, or other decisions affecting the full board. And then in number 2, it says adoption of bylaws and other significant matters. A quorum for purposes of adopting bylaws or other significant matters, including a proposed recommendation to council to remove a board member, shall be 2/3 of seated board members. and that's what we had already agreed on in the areas of agreement. So I know it's on two screens, Commissioner Facilitator Lara, but these are all like a package deal, so I'm hoping that we can approve them all at once.
Yes, thank you, Co-Chair. Then yeah, we will approve all or ask questions for all. Is there any questions, edits, or comments and all these parts? Yes, Commissioner Faith and then Commissioner Casey.
Thanks, Dan. I know Commissioner Dan, Co-Chair Dan, I know that this is a little bit of a Dan Handelman passion project, this section, and one that we all believe in. And I'm curious from your perspective, if you think that this is language that's politically tenable.
And before Commissioner Casey, you want to answer the question, Commissioner Dan? Co-Chair
Yeah,
Dan?
sure. We're already running up against that 15 minutes, I promise you. So my guess is we're going to last past 9:15. So I'm just going to warn you right now on that. But I tried to get an answer about this from the appropriate state agency that sets those rules, and they said I couldn't get the answer because I'm not an employee of the city of Portland asking for it. So what we need to do is put this into our code to give our city attorney's office or whoever appropriate to do this, but I think it's them, to reach out to that staff in the state and say, this is what we have written. What do you think about this? It's not going to be voted on by city council, be city code until June by the timeline that we set out. So it gives plenty of time for somebody to double check the legal reading on this.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Commissioner Faye, did I answer your question?
You can go to Casey.
Thank you. Commissioner Casey.
So my understanding on this issue is that our legal counsel has a different interpretation of the underlying law, and they do believe that we need to have it be a quorum of the total number rather than a quorum of the seated people. And my concern is that if there is a difference of opinion in what the law is, if we set the higher quorum and we end up being wrong, there's no impact of that other than the fact that, as Commissioner Dan very rightfully pointed out, the city council might not actually do their job and seat all of the people, which is certainly something to be concerned about. But I think if city council is undermining this, then that's going to cause all sorts of problems. But if we set the lower quorum and then somebody legally challenges it later on, that could potentially be pretty disastrous, is my understanding. They could overturn decisions already made by the board based on the fact that they did not have quorum when they made those decisions if a court interprets the law differently than this interpretation of it. So the board could potentially hire a director or make decisions about policy or things like that, and then have those challenged and overturned. So I am concerned about making this change sort of in the face of our legal counsel's advice.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey. Commissioner Debbie?
So I haven't had a chance to read the document that Co-Chair Handelman shared with us, but I think about that booklet that NACOL prepared on oversight systems. One thing they point to is how oversight systems can be undermined. And one of them is by the decision-making body, city council, whatever, kind of starving the budget. But, we've experienced in Portland firsthand that another way to do it is to not appoint the members that you need to actually operate. And so I think it would be good to really think carefully about this and seriously consider having this, this standard in our code.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Faith.
I'm going to be honest that I feel pretty torn on this one, y'all. I feel, Commissioner Debbie, I think that's a really good point, and I think we've seen that. And I also just feel like we have gotten so many no's on this topic. I'm feeling like there have been so many other places in which we've heeded like legal advice and what we think is politically feasible, that there is a part of me that's like, if we were going to not heed legal advice, this is not the one that I would have chosen. Like, I would have gone stronger on background checks, or I would have gone stronger in other places. So I guess my brain right now is weighing the political cost and benefit of us not heeding advice on this component. And I think I would rather address it similarly to other areas where we had to think creatively around another alternative, rather than ignoring sort of the recommendations we've received. But in principle, I agree with you, Dan, and Commissioner Debbie, I think that that's completely valid. And I guess I would ask for a third way of what's the creative alternative that we could put in here that we know is not going to get struck down.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, thank you. I just want to reiterate and exactly what Commissioner just said. I don't feel good about this either. I just would like to reiterate what was just said, and I think this is troublesome, and I don't feel comfortable with it. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Yumi.
Yeah, and I apologize for maybe opening an old can of worms here, but I'm wondering, since I wasn't here for this original discussion, I'm wondering, is there a reason that we don't just do the CRC method and state our quorum numerically and just get around it that way? I mean, CRC is 11 people. It's seldom fully seated. And so I think our thing in city code just says the quorum's 5, which is, I guess, 1 less than a majority.
Thank you, Commissioner Yumi. Commissioner Co-Chair Sima?
Also wanted to note that on top of what Commissioner Delgado said, that we can also leave it as something that the Oversight Board can suggest as their future policy changes to the state. Because I mean, if I understand what Commissioner Handelman is saying, that, you know, that there's a legal wordplay over here, and that there's a belief that we would get it right if we went in a different direction than what's defined, or what's being defined to us as what is state law, rules and law. But if that's something, I think it's something that we can leave to the board to be able to suggest and decide as far as, you know, how this can be suggested as a policy change, if there's a state law that might be affecting us negatively compared to what the willed interpretation is here. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. It made sense in my head, but it came out like thunderous spaghetti.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sima. Commissioner Debbie.
I just wonder if it'd be worth exploring this a little bit further with legal counsel.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Tim?
Yeah, I mean, if this is at all ambiguous legally, then this seems like a pretty big issue that we all have some pretty big opinions on, and that we should certainly, I would suggest, I mean, if we have legal counsel, like for goodness sakes, can't we get a definitive answer on this between now and 10 days from now and revisit this issue?
Thank you, Commissioner Team. Co-Chair Dan.
So, Commissioner Aiken, you have spurred my creative mind, and I think it should say, where quorum is based on the number of seated members, the number of members present to vote on those matters should never be less than 10, consistent with state law and policy. And in that way, if that's not consistent with state law and policy, it'll revert to the default.
Thank you.
And we need to add that in the other two sections as well, probably, staff.
And I will wait for staff to add those, but also staff.
Yeah. So I'm going to quickly show a different two other documents. This is Resolution 37527, which established the selection criteria for the commission, and which it said that the commission needs to work specifically with the city attorney's office to ensure the recommendations comply with collective bargaining and other legal requirements. Similarly, in Resolution 37548, there's the commission will work with the city attorney's office to ensure the recommendations comply with collective bargaining and other requirements. Other here includes legal. The commission's role is not merely to recommend city code, but to recommend city code that is itself compliant with higher order law. And the city attorney's office has been very consistent, not only to the PAC on this issue, but in public meetings in the context of the PAC's own bylaws a year and a half ago when this came back. When this came up in the context of when the PAC was setting its own bylaws, and there was a concern there. But the city attorney's office also advises the city council, so they're hearing the same thing that you're hearing. And I just want to strongly, strongly encourage all of you who've worked so hard not to jeopardize that by recommending something that multiple attorneys have advised against. It's just it seems like something that is fully within your control to recommend what you would like, but there's that. Separately, in discussions with the Office of Equity and Human Rights, who is still in the process of reviewing this, there is also the equity impacts of a quorum shift, which we requested. Separately, staff did this for a different advisory group last year and found some interesting equity impacts in terms of equity within the memberships of groups that have higher or lower quorum standards. And so that may be helpful information as well, coming back to you if and when OEHR's equity review comes back, because I would hope that that's also a relevant factor if there is content related to the equity impacts in your decision making. Thanks.
Thank you, staff. Co-Chair Dan?
Right. Well, I'd just like to have the opportunity for us to discuss the language I proposed that says consistent with state law and policy that covers us in case my reading of this case law is wrong, but I don't think it is. I talked with several other people, and people seem to think that my interpretation of it is correct. So I just want to be clear that we can put that flexibility language in there, and I think we can still meet those standards that the staff is talking about.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Commissioner Monica?
I would like to revisit Commissioner Yuma's suggestion to have a proposed number of a quorum as a minimum of a certain number and just leave it at that.
Commissioner Co-Chair Dan, and then staff.
Yeah, sorry, I had meant to respond to that. I think it's very troubling that the CRC has that. They have 11 members and a quorum of 5, which means that from an equity standpoint, less than half of them can make decisions. So I think it's better for us not to follow that path, because we will end up with an even larger equity issue than the one that's being suggested about the sliding scale.
Commissioner Monica, and I want to time check, it's 9:20. But
Could we propose a number that is higher than half, like 18?
Co-chair Dan and then staff.
Right. Well, the problem is that half of 33 is 16 plus 4, 17. And if we make it too high, then it'll be like when we're having trouble having our meetings. And then if they start having members not show up, then they're going to have a hard time meeting, or not have those seats not be filled. They're going to have a hard time meeting whatever that number is. So I'm strongly encouraging my fellow commissioners to put in flexible language like we put in the other places. That way we can still meet the requirements, and somebody can check this before council actually votes on the package in 2024.
Thank you, Co-chair Dan. Staff?
Thank you. Yeah, so just to clarify, going to first to Co-chair Seemov's question, alternates would not count either way. So it's still out of 33, and it still would be a majority of that, or whatever standard, whatever fraction of that. And their presence would also not count either way. To the other question, it obviously there is precedent from the CRC that is allowed, and also again in a public meeting, City Attorney's Office did advise that changing the numerator of the fraction, so to speak, is perfectly legal to do. So numerator meaning if it's 17 out of 33 by default, that the 17 can be changed up or down. And where the issue has been previously identified is in the denominator of the fraction. So there's that. I would be happy to get something in writing from or ask for something in writing from both attorneys once more. I think if the group is willing to, or I shouldn't say willing, but if there is a modified consensus in favor of not needing to do that, then that wouldn't be something that we'd request. But otherwise, yeah, there may be a need to do so, and if so, staff will definitely ask for it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just gonna ask the question because it's the process, and then we can go from there. Commissioner Sophia.
So I want to ask: Are we looking to vote or consensus on this matter? Because I'm still not feeling comfortable. So I'm not even feeling comfortable enough because I don't feel like I have enough information to vote on this right now. So that's my comment. And I would suggest that, we come back to this Thursday. I just need more time to think about it. And I would like to get some legal counsel discussions on it as well. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everyone, we're not voting. Also, it's just consensus. And also, this is not a final vote. It's just allowing members of the PAC to move on to other items and then come back after making some final technical fixes for a final vote next week. It's just doing a final draft, but continue being a draft. It's not that you're approving this document, you're not gonna be able to move changes or anything. Okay, I will pass it to Commissioner Yumi and then staff.
I was just gonna support Commissioner Sophia's comment with the caveat that I don't know if that messes up our timetable. So if that's not going to derail things to have this an unfinished proposal on Thursday, I think it might make sense to postpone it and try and get to consensus, because I know we have other things on the agenda tonight and it's 9:25 and I'm going to stay late, but there's a limit to that.
Yeah, Co-Chair Dan?
All right, so here's my proposal. I propose that we table this language, but turn the proposed language over to the attorneys and ask them to check with the state body that does determines these rules to see if they agree with the interpretation of the Hoppy decision that I've been saying, because that's what we're lacking. Nobody's been able to do or has done that, to my knowledge. That's what I'd like to ask the commission to support, that we take the language that we've done, table it, ask the city attorney to run it to the state regulating body for an opinion, and then we revisit it when we get an answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Co-Chair Charlie?
Yes, I just want to support what Co-Chair Dan Handelman just put forward, because I also, I don't feel comfortable with just the lack of a clear interpretation of what's going on here. And I do think we need more legal input on this. And from the state, that would be, yeah, if they're the ones we need to go to, let's go there.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Commissioner Casey?
So I'm happy to get the further advice from legal counsel, and I'm happy to see if they're able to make that ask and get it fulfilled. I will just say, in my experience, you are not going to get a answer from a state regulatory body in 2 days on something like this. So I don't know that it's realistic to say that we're going to get an answer from them and then return to this issue before our work here is concluded.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey. It's a very good point. Okay. Staff?
I'm happy to do that if that's the will of the commission. To answer Commissioner Yume's question, I think the question that the PAC needs to step back. The PAC has to provide a code package. The report, the final report, is optional technically under the Council Resolution 37548. The minority report is also optional. So the question for the PAC will be, to what degree do you want to spend time on the remaining things that may take time away from the report or reports that you would otherwise approve in the next few days? And that's entirely your decision. But it is a zero-sum game. There is a finite amount of time left. There are 10 days, 2 hours, and 32 minutes left of the PAC. And so, to answer the question directly, there's not an issue with fulfilling the role of the PAC, because I think it's pretty easy to say that you would finish the code. But it takes time away from the things that are technically optional but that you'd like to do. And for each potential issue that you discuss, I think that each member may have a different view of the relative merit of spending time on that versus something else. Certainly on things which have been given advice on. So, I think to the point that Commissioner Monica said, using the phrase minority report here is really the text of things that you might want to have be different, the parameters that you had to work with, which, as Co-Chair Simod pointed out, is actually a category in which this falls, because this does have to do with state rules. But if that's what the commission would like to do, maybe when we get to the part about closing discussion on it and effectively approving it as a final draft, other than this section, staff is very happy to ask both sets of attorneys to give their opinions, and that the city attorney contact the state as well.
Okay, thank you, staff. What I understood is that we're gonna pass this. We're gonna continue with the last item on the document, then continue with the process and try to approve this as a final draft, with knowing that this particular item, staff is gonna look for advice?
This is actually the last item on the document.
Okay, okay. Then we can continue with the process and then we see. Okay, I'm not gonna ask for that because I know you're gonna require more advice and everybody agrees to it, correct? People say they were not, commissioners, they were not feel comfortable approving, agreeing on this. Okay. The next item is the commission will now decide whether the commission should close discussion on this document and move on to the next agenda item, the PAC report. There is a potential agreement document that was circulated that gives some context as to this decision. This is not a final vote. Just allowing members of the PAC to move in other items and then come back after making some final technical fixes for the final vote next week, and also receiving the opportunity to receive more advice on this particular item. What it is making this document a final draft. Before seeing if there is consensus around approving this document, we're going to take public comment. We ask members to the public to keep their comments to 3 minutes in length and to keep their comments focused on the draft document. You can raise your hand in Zoom if you like to be called. And I will ask members of the community if they would like to make a comment. Now is the time.
And I'll just note that there is a comment in the Q&A that's been waiting for quite a while, actually. So just wanted to flag that for everyone and just to read that into the record. Quote, I may forget by the time it comes to public comment, but I wanted to mention that there is already some concern from PPA members that has been picked up by some members of City Council that police would be judged by a committee of criminals, and I believe they will fight you on this, end quote. Just wanted that to be read into the record. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any public comment. And since we don't have a comment, I will pass it to Co-Chair Dan.
So Facilitator Laura, I'm looking at my agenda and it says closure of discussion here. So we're not voting on the document. So I'm hoping that as part of our decision to pass this on to ourselves to approve as part of our final package, that the proposal I already put on the table is that that item about the quorum should ask the city attorney to contact the state agency with the proposed language to see if it meets the HOPI decision. That was my proposal that didn't get addressed.
Okay. And we can ask that. Yes, staff?
Yeah, the other part of this, and these are just effectively caveats to the question, is something that co-chairs also mentioned earlier, that they would be able to go back and do any of the little technical fixes that may have been missed from now until the next time this document's picked up. Thanks.
Thank you. Co-chair Dan, then what, can you repeat what you're proposing? That way I can ask if the members are
certainly. It's right in the chat, 931 post that I put. Table the document, ask the city attorney to contact the state agency with a proposed language around quorum. Sorry, that should be in there, to see if it meets the HOPI decision.
Yes, staff?
Sorry, it's already in the, put it in the comments there and I'll lower my hand now, sorry.
Okay. Let me get it. Okay. Is there a strong opposition to the proposal of co-chair Dan to table the document, as the city attorney could contact the state agency with the proposed language to see if it meets the POP decision. Language and correct. Okay, sorry. I'm confused and I'm sorry. Staff, can you tell me, please?
Yeah, so the question is effectively to allow this document to be a final draft, noting that co-chairs will still be adjusting, and staff, for technical edits, and we'll make those transparent, and that this text around quorum that's in lines 653 to, sorry, 617 to 654 is tabled pending staff asking attorneys for additional legal advice, including city attorney's office, to contact state for clarity regarding this text and the Hoppy decision as it relates to quorum. And I'll also note that all the proposed changes in here will be incorporated pending legal advice. Does that, hopefully that creates clarity around what's being asked right now.
Thank you. And your first question, if is there a stronger position to do that? What? Samir say. Okay. Is there a general agreement to do what Co-Chair Dan and Samir explained? Thank you. Okay, we have transformed this document until a draft, the final draft, with the piece that you all agree? Okay. Now we're gonna go to the next item on the agenda. Oh, then we go to public comment in general. That is not about the document, but in general public comment. Is that any members of the public that would like to share anything about the PAC or any story? Now is the time. Okay. There is no public comment, but Co-Chair Sima wants to say something. No? Okay, thank you. Then we go to the next item on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is draft final report. Next, open discussion and revision inputs. Next member can discuss anything that came up in their document review that you like to bring to your colleagues' attentions that might help in updating the document later today. Members volunteer at previous meetings to read and report back. In addition to reporting back, you can discuss anything that came from these documents that might be help you develop your code recommendations. Is there anything that any of the members would like to mention or report back?
Hi, Victoria. I have something.
Sure. Go ahead, Commissioner Fate.
Sorry, guys. I know it's 9:39, but I did my homework, so we're going to just go over it quickly and thoroughly. There's a spreadsheet in the email that Samir sent around our final meeting documents. Co-Chair Dan and I reviewed the memo that City Council sent to us in the beginning of June and went through kind of line by line to see their kind of conundrum and where we are. And so I'm not going to go through line by line with you all now because that's wild, but I do want to, so you can see we mark them as status All the green ones are done or addressed in our code with responses on the right. And the ones in yellow are ones that are in progress or will be determined by the board. So I just want to go over the ones in yellow, and y'all, it's only like 4. So I'll do that. And then if there's any questions, we can have that. And we don't need to write a formal response to this memo that was written to us, but I do think that some of these should be included in our final report. So let's go over the first one. I'm gonna read really fast. Because of the significant amount of research you have done over these months, it would aid City Council's evaluation to note your recommendation when existing IPR and our professional standards practices are recommended for the new system. Citations to legal authorities supporting research and our cities that are already employing a recommended strategy, blah, 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 cite your work is what that is saying. And our response is, this is in progress. The PAC is working hard to compare the proposed city code to the existing code, policies, and laws in which our proposal is based. So yes, we'll do that. The second one that is in progress, it is important that the PAC be clear about legal limitations that apply to the current system and how they will also apply to the new system. And in progress, the PAC may include a statement about such limitations in our final report. Responsibility to explain these limitations will fall mostly to the new board. Okay, so scrolling down, all of these are green. We've done them or we've clarified in our response. I'm on row 20. So they ask how to communicate these limitations to the public to ensure accurate understanding and trust in the new system. And we are saying that we will address this in the report, and the board will also have that responsibility. I'm going down to row 23, and they ask for clarity regarding how the PAC envisions the city providing mental health support and services to non-employees and any resulting legal implications. And this is one where we couldn't really answer because we didn't understand what the question was. So I'll read just our thoughts. The PAC is not sure whether the city is concerned about legal repercussions from a city-provided mental health practitioner's treatment of a volunteer, or whether there is concern that other volunteers will want access to similar care. PAC outlined the reason that the board members would receive such care in our areas of agreement on board membership, including the heavy workload on these community members, their responsibility to make disciplinary decisions, and that many of the cases will involve traumatic elements, which might include autopsy and other such photographic evidence. So this will be a resource for us in our final report. And I think that co-chairs and staff specifically, and you're drafting the one that the green sections that say clarified rather than done would likely benefit being included in the final report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. Is there any other member of the PAC that would like to do a report? Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Faith, for doing your homework and provide us the information. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is member curiosities. As a brief period where members of the commission can bring items to discuss. There may be questions or follow-ups. We're not going to vote on anything during this item. We want to give a space to multiple members to share. So please take 1 minute per person at most during this time. We'll get to suggestions in a moment, but we'll start by asking if any members have questions about the PAC and its process that they'd like to have answered. Commissioner Debbie.
So I realized that pretty soon we're all going to not be have access to these email accounts that we have. And I was thinking that after, you know, all this process that's going to go on to for City Council to consider our proposal, we may want to connect with one another to help, you know, in the efforts to support it. And so I was wondering if possibly there would be some way for all of us who are interested in staying in touch with each other to send our email, personal email and telephones to a central location, and then we could give each other a handout at the end with all of our contact information. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Okay, next item. Is there any other thing on members' curiosities? No, thank you. Next item is minority report. I will pass it to staff.
Yes, thank you. So, as has been pointed out a couple times, there's the possibility of the PAC issuing a minority report. I think the colloquial understanding of minority report may be a little bit different from what is actually specified. So just going to show that on screen real quick. This is the scope of work of the commission as assigned by council from resolution 37548. And it's down at the bottom. The first, this is under optional duties, and so the number one is the report, the final report, but number two is the requirement here. So you as it was pointed out by co-chairs and by others in the past, there is no requirement that this means that someone had to vote against the final recommendations of the PAC in order to issue it. But it is designed to reflect something which is, not necessarily the views of everybody on the commission, not necessarily a consensus position, or modified consensus position. Having said that, there's also things which may be envisioned for this that may end up in the final report, as co-chair Dan pointed out, if the noting of the limitations that perhaps the commission may have wished were not there. Maybe things that, if that is a consensus view, that wish is a consensus view, may just fit into the regular report. But just wanted to flag that if there's anything that's coming up down the next few days that you're feeling as an individual member may be helpful to reflect in the report, but is not necessarily a consensus view to include in the final report, please start tracking that and reach out to staff and co-chairs so that can start being incorporated. We'll have an outline of that document, probably ideally by the end of the week, ideally by Thursday, just because that's the time we've got. So there is an outline of the final report and all of that, but the minority report, it's hard to predict that without knowing what the issues might be and whether or not they are in fact consensus positions or not. So to some degree, this is going to be drafted through the process of drafting the final report. And then if there are things which are not a consensus, but yet critical in your view to the council or public understanding the outcomes of the commission, then please note that for staff and for co-chairs. Thanks. And I'll pass it to Commissioner Faith.
Commissioner Faith?
Thank you, that's helpful. A quick question on this, and maybe follow up from Debbie's question earlier. Will we still have access to emails and resources? Like, as we prepare for our city council presentation, it would be awfully yucky to just be cut off from email. And then, so as we don't know yet when our city council presentation is it like August 31st? We don't even have city emails anymore. Well, BTS doesn't move that fast. So I'm guessing no.
It's not that date, but we could get that information for you. I imagine, but I can't guarantee that it'll be through at least the date of the council presentation, whenever that is, which is not yet set.
Thank you.
Thank you. Co-Chair Dan?
So I just want to reiterate that on Friday, when the co-chair sent out our request for people to look at the different sections of the code that we helped us with our work tonight, we also asked for people to put in things that they felt might need to go into the minority report, and clearly if a majority of the commission agrees on something, it'll make it to the full report. So we'll keep sending those in, because we can draft something then to look at. We also, I thought we were going to get a draft copy of the report tonight. It looks like that didn't happen, but once that's available, we're going to want people to do the same thing that we did with this, and take the sections that are new to us, like the areas of agreement are mostly all stuff that we've seen before, and the code that we just looked at is mostly the same, but all the new sections, we should break that down and have people look at it. I think that worked really well, not having like 1 or 2 people try to do the whole thing when it's 95 pages, and this is going to be even longer. So, and then with the minority report staff, I forgot to bring this up, but it occurred to me that we haven't voted on that many things in our 18 whatever months it is. And if we find those places where we ended up voting on stuff, that might be something just to contemplate including the minority report, but it's not necessarily has to be included in there, but it could help give us a hint of, you know, places where we didn't all agree on everything. Thanks.
Thank you, Coach Dan. Staff will not make a comment? No? Okay. Now we're gonna pass to the next item on the agenda. It's the conclusion of our meeting. As a reminder, you can submit advanced public comment to the Police Accountability Commission via web form, voicemail, or postal mail. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions. Thank you also to the interpreters. And finally, thank you to the members of the community for attending and contributing with your questions. If you're not already signed for email update, please also sign to receive updates from the PAC. The next meeting of the Police Accountability Commission will be this coming Thursday, August 24 at 6:30 p.m., 6:30 to 9 p.m. Please note that all PAC meetings are now hybrid with an in-person location at the Portland Building, room 108. It is 9:52 and this meeting is adjourned.
Recording stopped.